Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums. Today, we're going to take a look at the catalog of the great Raleigh, North Carolina band Corrosion of Conformity, a band who somehow have been around for like 40 years. It's crazy to think about it, right? Not a ton of albums over the course of that 40 years, right? We got, 10 albums here. And a band that has kind of like morphed and changed, but has been pretty consistent on the scene. Never a really huge band, but I think a really influential band. And today you kind of look at the career of Corrosion of Conformity, and they've got that kind of like punk hardcore beginnings, but they quickly morphed into more of like initially just a straight up kind of metal band with some doom influences, and then have become since then probably one of the preeminent stoner metal, stoner rock bands on the scene. A little bit of sludge, right? What is sludge? Sludge is like doom and hardcore kind of colliding, but man, just like a southern fried stoner rock, stoner metal band. That's kind of what they do. They've got their own distinctive sound, big riffs everywhere to be found here. The great vocals most of the time from Pepper Keenan. Of course, Pepper also in Down, right? So, and a lot of these musicians from these bands from like down south, these more like kind of like metal, stoner, hardcore, sludge bands from down there, Crowbar and Down and I Hate God and Corrosion of Conformity. I mean, they kind of like, they all have this kind of like fraternity down there, which is really, really cool. So I'm going to rank the albums as I like them. I've been listening to this band for a long time. I don't have everything on physical copy. The first four on my list I do not own a physical copy of, but I have all the others, so I'll have the little presentation here to kind of go along to help us along the way, so you can actually see the albums as I'm talking about them. So let's start with my number 10, right? So let's bring to the stage number 10. I'm going to go with Eye for an Eye, right? So this is their debut from 1984. Again, it just boggles my mind to think like that this album came out like 40 years ago, but then it shouldn't, because I remember when I was like a freshman in college, these guys were just coming out, and you get some people that I was friends with at school, we were all this metal community there, and there were some of the ones who leaned into like the hardcore and punk side of things. They were talking about this band Corrosion of Conformity. I remember a couple of them had the cassette, right, and we're like, so this would get played a lot. As such, it's mostly a hardcore punk album, which, as you know, that's not really my thing. Even back then, I was kind of like, this is kind of cool, but it's not really what I listen to. But there's an intensity of this album. Again, revisiting it recently after all these years, I hadn't heard this album in a long time. There's an intensity to this album that's kind of undeniable. And I think Woody's riffs are always fun to listen to, no matter what style the band is doing. But there's a guy singing on this album called Eric Ike. I don't really care for his vocal style at all. Most of these songs are kind of like 1 to 3 minutes long. I tend to gravitate towards the longer, more structured songs on here, like Tell Me, LS, Coexist, and What. Those are pretty good, right? They're again more kind of hardcore-y type songs, but you hear elements of kind of where they would start going not too long afterwards. They even do a pretty cool cover of the Green Manalishi, which I think that you listen to that and you're like, okay, well, there's kind of like their metal roots talking. And again, you listen to their reworking of that. Of course, Judas Priest did one of the great covers of that song. Well, this is kind of a cover of their song. Pretty cool. So, but for me, I mean, this is like, out of their whole catalog, this is like one of the albums that like, I really don't care all that much for. But again, I fully understand where some people might consider this one of their best, right? I don't really like the vocals. I don't like these little 40-minute-and-a-half long songs, these quick little punk things. Don't really do anything for me. But though, like I said, the ones that I mentioned, they're a little longer, a little bit more structured, a little more riffy. I kind of dig those. Those aren't too bad. So, but that's my number 10, Eye for an Eye. We're going to go number 9. So we're going to go to their 2000 album, America's Volume Dealer. This is their 6th album. So they, for a good chunk of their career, have worked with this producer called John Custer. He, again, produced this album. He's worked on a good chunk of the albums in their catalog. This one Shows up on Sanctuary Records. If you're a metal fan and you know a little bit of hit the last 30 years in heavy music, right? Sanctuary Records kind of popped up as this new record label where a lot of veteran bands would go to if they got, dumped from their major label deal, right? Sanctuary Records was scooping up a lot of heavy bands around that time. This is probably their most melodic and straightforward kind of Southern metal, Southern rock record. It's definitely more polished than the stuff that came before. It's kind of missing that doomy edge also that permeated a lot of their music around this time. But there are some decent songs on here. Over Me, pretty catchy, pretty riffy. Congratulations Songs got some nasty fuzz riffing and blazing leads from Woody. But the chorus sounds more like anthemic Southern rock to me. There's always been, like, especially during this period, like maybe the 90s and the early 2000s. And I think that Pepper kind of brought this to the band. There's like this kind of Lynyrd Skynyrd vibe meets this big doomy stoner metal thing going on. And you get a lot of that on this album. Stare Too Long is a perfect example. That's just bluesy Southern rock, but not all that interesting. But, this album is pretty well produced. And again, it gives you a little different feel for the band. So I can kind of appreciate it. And again, there's that Lynyrd Skynyrd vibe, which is kind of, you just can't miss it. Diablo Boulevard is pretty nasty. That's a pretty groovy song. I like that. Some really raunchy guitar riffs and licks and a really good vocal from Pepper. It's easily probably my favorite song on the album. Double Wide, it's Double Wide. We know it's kind of a generic rocker, nothing special. Zippo, pretty groovy, kind of rocks. Who's Got the Fire, Sleeping Martyr, Take What You Want. To me, they're just missing that COC muscle, which I think is lacking on this album. And some of these songs just kind of come across a little bit bland and uninteresting. But then you got 13 Angels. That's nearly 7 minutes long. It's kind of plodding, bluesy, doomy. It's okay. It's nothing spectacular, but Pepper sounds great. Pepper always sounds great. Getting It On as a closer. That's pretty good. That's kind of up tempo. Not too bad. Ends the album on a kind of a high note. But overall, I feel most of this album, other than a couple tracks, is pretty forgettable. And, they were kind of like on a bit of a roll up until this point. And I think this kind of like had people kind of scratching their heads like, geez, what's happened to Corrosion of Conformity, right? So yeah, that's my number 9. My number 8, I'm going to go with their self-titled release from 2012. So this is their 8th album, again, working with John Custer. This one is on Candlelight Records. I remember when this album came out, they had one other on Candlelight too. I was kind of thinking, well, it's mostly known as like a black label, or an extreme metal label, but kind of cool. I mean, Corrosion of Conformity, kind of high profile for a label like that. You got Reed Mullen back on drums. Of course, their original guy, he kind of left for a little bit. Pepper Keenan has now left the band. He left for a couple of albums. So now you got basically Woody and Mike Dean on bass. They're both handling lead vocals. You got a song called Psychic Vampires, which sees kind of like a subtle shift in kind of style from the previous bunch of albums. A little bit more of their early hardcore punk edge kind of slipping back in, mixing with that stoner sludge type of style. Riverstone, decent crusher. But by the time you get a couple songs in, I'm already starting to miss the vocals of Pepper Keenan. Nothing really against Woody and Mike. They're serviceable, but Pepper kind of special, right? And then now all of a sudden you're kind of like, these songs are pretty good, but man, the vocals are just kind of a little lackluster. Leeches, more of a punk number, fast and furious. Your Tomorrow, also pretty fast and blazing, more of like that punk aesthetic. But it's pretty catchy. The Doom totally crushes, and that's probably my favorite song on the album. I think Woody's guitar tone is monstrous. That's the one constant throughout all these albums. Woody is a really good player and a great riff guy. Very, very much underrated as far as like creator of great riffs, and his tone is always really, really good. But again, the vocals are kind of lackluster. But Reed's drumming is amazing. He's a great drummer, by the way. The Money Changers, also really good riffs. Time of Trials is another good one. I think, though, that there's plenty to like on this album. It's heavy. It's groovy. But it's a little bit different than the albums that came before it. Again, trying to kind of move forward. We're going to go back in time to our early stuff a little bit, but do something a little different. I think it's a pretty solid record. I think everything from kind of here on in either is solid to really good to great. But yeah, the main takeaway for me here is that I miss Pepper's vocals quite a bit on this album. But otherwise, decent album. Number 7, we're going to go all the way back to their second album, Animosity. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to rank this way higher than me. This was basically the album that really started to get a lot of attention. Like I said, this is 1985, the second album. A lot of friends of mine were listening to this big time back when I was in college. At the time, again, never really much for me. You got Mike Dean on bass taking on over lead vocals here. Reed's singing a little bit too on drums as well. It still has that hardcore punk element from the debut, but I think now the band is like throwing some thrash into the mix, and I think that's why a lot of like metal fans were really getting into this band right around this time, because there was some thrash elements going on here. Like I said, this was big with the crowd I was hanging out with at the time. You know, we were all listening to like SOD and Anthrax and Slayer and DRI and Cro-Mags, Agnostic Front, Slayer, Metallica, so on and so forth, right? Starting right around here over the next like year or two. So a lot of people were like jumping all over Animosity, is kind of fitting in that whole scene, right? Songs are generally a little longer here than they are on the debut. They're a little meatier. The guitars are produced really, really well. I mean, Reed's riffing is just great on this album. I mean, I'm sorry, Woody's guitar riffs are really great on this album. Lost for Words, pretty heavy. Consumed, Holier, Positive Outlook, Prayer, and the title track are all pretty brutal, pretty thrashy. Like I said, you listen to some of these songs and you can see why, you know, so many bands were kind of influenced by this era in Corrosion of Conformity. Now, not the whole album isn't 100% my cup of tea, but I can totally appreciate it and see why people will probably rank this a lot higher than me. I do like a good chunk of it. Some of it, like I said, is not quite for me, but I like the kind of next period in the history of Corrosion of Conformity. So now those are the first 2 albums, easily the most probably different from everything else. And of course, you know, we got Pepper joining the band a few years later on, right? Because they kind of go, there's like a period where they're not really, you know, releasing much in full length albums and things like that. They're playing live a lot. So there's kind of like this little gap here then in the recorded history of the band. So that's my number 7. My number 6, I am going to go with this album. I can probably take this off the screen here now because I don't need this anymore. I've got everything else. All right, so next I'm going to go with their album simply titled 9. IX9 from 2014, 9th album. Mr. Custer again producing. This is also on Candlelight Records. You got Mike Dean, Woody Weatherman, and Reed Mullen doing the power trio thing. And you know, always kind of dug the packaging on this. It's just dark and just live shots, right? Power trio, right? Brand New Sleep is total doom-laden, sludgy stoner, killer riffs, slow, crushing. Interestingly enough, as I was talking about the album before, I really miss Pepper's vocals. I don't mind it as much on this album. I think these guys kind of got their shit together a little bit more about how to record and present the vocals on this album. So actually, it sounds fine on this record, as opposed to the Corrosion of Conformity self-titled record. Elfin, totally irresistible, groovy riff fest. Just love it. Denmark Vesey, again, goes back to their kind of like their punk roots. Not a big fan of that song. It just, compared to everything else on this album, it just kind of doesn't fit. The Nectar, a lot of tasty riffing. Got this slow, like dirgy middle section, which is just absolutely awesome. On Your Way totally crushes. Trucker is also good. And man, Woody's just throwing in a never-ending batch of just tasty riffage one after another. So good. The Hangman kicks all sorts of ass. It's doomy, it's sludgy, and Woody's tone is just absolutely monstrous on that. I think this album might have some of his best guitar tones ever. It's just absolutely crushing. Tarkin is Superbus. It's kind of thrashy. Kind of dig that. Who Do You Need to Blame? I think to me is a cool throwback to their Deliverance album. Kind of reminds me of that kind of southern stoner sludgy type thing. Really good. Lots of groove, lots of riffs. Overall, I think this is a really strong album. I think the band is really trying to get back to doing what made them really popular to begin with, even though Pepper's not in the band. But he's back in the band not too long afterwards. I think he even co-wrote one of the songs on here. So they were starting to work together again. So the return of Pepper Keenan is not too far off. So that's my number 6. My number 5, I'm going to go with 2005's In the Arms of God. Right, and here you can see on this one, you got the nod to the debut album there, right? Very, very cool stuff. And this is on Sanctuary Records. We talked about one of their other ones. So again, John Custer producing this one again. This is the first album not to feature Reed Mullen. Got Stanton Moore recording drums on the album, although I don't think he was ever officially a full-time member of the band. This is the last one to feature Pepper Keenan for a number of years, but a really strong album. Stonebreaker, terrific opener, lot of groove, one killer riff after another, great opener. And I think Pepper's vocals are just absolutely nasty. They're notorious for, during Pepper's time in the band, they always a lot of like effects on his vocals and stuff at times. He's just got this kind of like he's singing through a megaphone type of thing at times. Some people may like that, some people don't, but he's got just so much of that kind of southern drawly grit going on that it works really, really well. Paranoid Opiate kicks ass. I love the slower kind of stoner riffs and grooves of It Is That Way, which I think is great. Dirty Hands, Empty Pockets, Already Gone. That's kind of a weird one. It's kind of got like the spoken word vocal from Pepper, and then part of it's kind of like just like crushing stoner rock with nasty riffing. It's kind of a weird one. I'm not crazy about the spoken word stuff on there, but the rest of it is okay. Rise River Rise, got acoustic guitar, more haunting kind of bluesy number. It's okay. Never Turn to More is totally rampaging, 8 minutes long, great riffs, great solos from Woody, and Pepper's vocals are just nasty, really, really good. I love that song, really good. Infinite War is like a total like lean and mean doom crusher that's got this like Black Sabbath Master of Reality vibe to it. It's one of my favorites from the album, so good. Then you got So Much Left Behind, which is really heavy, kind of psychedelic. You get a little more psych vibes on the Backslider, which is also really heavy. Then you got the more straightforward World on Fire. Great guitar tones on this song and the whole album, actually. And then Crown of Thorns is this kind of creepy little acoustic blues number, which I'm not much into it. But In the Arms of God, the title track closes, and that's big and meaty and riffy, a lot of intensity and just really heavy. I think overall, this is a very underrated album from them. Plenty of killer stuff, a couple tracks that don't really do a lot for me, but there's a lot of stuff on here. So you can kind of get away with 2 or 3 songs that are maybe not all that great, but the rest of it's just absolutely, just totally killer. So that is my number 5. My number 4, I'm going to go with Wiseblood from 1996. So this is their 5th album, and this also has Mr. Custer producing. This is Columbia Records. I believe this is their last album for Columbia Records, because they were on the major label for a little bit. This is very similar sounding to Deliverance. Of course, the album that came before it, that's kind of their big album. Hold on. The one thing, though, the songs aren't quite as memorable and catchy as the stuff on Deliverance, but it's similarly as heavy, if not heavier. It's got King of the Rotten, great opener. You got the Big Doomy Long Whip, Big America, which got some just absolutely serious guitar crunch. I do like the production on this album a lot. The title track, furious and heavy. Goodbye Windows just has some just massive, massive riffage. Born Again for the Last Time, to me, sound, again, that Skynyrd vibe, but obviously much heavier. Drowning in a Daydream kind of sounds to me like Load era Metallica. It's kind of generic sounding. It's just kind of like, all right, we're kind of trying to be bluesy. We're still trying to be heavy, but we want to make sure it's catchy. It's okay, but it's just kind of generic sounding for me. The Snake Has No Head just absolutely crushes. That could be my favorite song on the album. What a riff. Just absolutely amazing. Then you got The Door, another big monster groove, big heavy stomp, just awesome. Manor Ash is also really doomy and rampaging. And in fact, you got James Hetfield guesting on backing vocals on that. In more than a few instances on a couple of these like mid 90s albums, you got Pepper is kind of doing this kind of like Hetfield style bark. So there's these references to Metallica quite a bit. So it's kind of odd almost that James guests on this particular track. But it's a great, great song. I really like it a lot. It's another one of my favorites here, Manor Ash. Then you got Redemption City, which is moody, kind of psychedelic. I kind of dig that. Wishbone, big, furious, fast, total masher of a track. I really like that. And then you got Fuel, which goes, again, back to the original hardcore and punk roots. So that could have come from like one of the first two albums. And then they do this, because they tend to, on a few albums, they do like a bunch of instrumentals, like usually shorter ones. But on this one, you got the real doomy bottom feeder, which is just heavy and ominous. It's like, that's when the instrumentals for them work, they really, really work. So overall, I think not everything on here is absolutely top shelf stuff, but what's good here is really good. And to me, it's just not as immediate as its predecessor, right? But it's still really, really good. So that's my number 4. My number 3, I'm going to go with 2018's No Cross, No Crown, their 10th album and most recent. John Custer once again producing. Now they're on Nuclear Blast Records, right? That's kind of like a big deal for a metal band these days. And now we're back to the classic 4-piece of Pepper, Woody, Reed, and Mike for the first time in 18 years. And it does not disappoint. The Luddite, I mean, when the Luddite kicks in, they got this opening little instrumental thing, and then the Luddite comes on. It's kind of like mid-90s Corrosion of Conformity all over again. Just an absolutely killer track. The guitars are massive. It's great to have Pepper back on vocals. Screaming Woody lead guitars, just an absolute cranker of a track. So, so good. Cast the First Stone, totally kicks ass. Wolf Named Crow, groovy stoner metal, very anthemic, really good. Reed's drumming is just nimble and just kind of flying underneath all these big crushing riffs from Woody and Pepper. Just really, really cool stuff. Little Man, that could have come off of Deliverance. Just a really great slice of like southern sludgy stoner metal. Really, really good. Forgive Me, it's pretty catchy, but still pretty heavy. Nothing Left to Say is just dripping with melancholy. It's kind of doomy. I dig that. Really good Pepper vocal on that one. Old Disaster, heavy. ELM or Elm is just groovy, but really heavy. Love that. It's got some massive riffing. The title track is kind of weird. It's like this little spoken word, kind of creepy type of thing. And then they do a cover of Son and Daughter from Queen, which is a total face melter, and got to give them credit for doing a cover of a kind of obscure early Queen song from their debut album, which is really, really cool. Also, A Quest to Believe is also another good one on this one. That's got some cool slide guitar. That's pretty good, nice and heavy. The one thing I didn't mention, there's a bunch of instrumentals on this album. I think there's like 4 of them, and most of them are kind of short. They don't really have much impact. And I remember when this album first came out, I was kind of like, how about we ditch these instrumentals, which don't really do all that much, and just give us another kick-ass 4 or 5 minute long song, right? But overall, it's a hell of an album and a great reunion of the classic lineup, I think. Just really, really good. I would highly recommend that one to anybody who hasn't checked it out, from 2018. And my number 1 and 2 were pretty much set, but I was going back and forth between them, because one just made such an impact on me when it came out, but the other one I think I have grown to love so much in more recent years. So, but I'm pretty set, I think, with the way I'm going to do them. So I'm going to go number 2. I'm going to go with Blind from 1991, which is their 3rd album. They are looking all sorts of young there, right? Kick-ass album. So this is on Relativity Records. That's what this came out on Relativity, although I think in recent reissues, this was on Sony Columbia, right? I think maybe originally it was on Relativity, and then once the band got signed to the major label, they re-released this on the major label. John Custer, again producing. This comes 6 years after Animosity, so it was a long time between records. Pepper Keenan joins on second guitar and vocals. And this is Carl Agel's only appearance on lead vocals. Carl, of course, has done all sorts of other things on the stoner rock scene in recent years, but this was his one kind of like big claim to fame, as being the lead singer from Corrosion of Conformity for one album. The music is more straight up metal, I think, but with a healthy doom vibe. But they're just heavy as all hell. The Shrouded Temples instrumental opens, and that's an example of doing instrumentals in this type of format that really works. It sounds like it could have been like a little leftover jam from And Justice for All by Metallica. The guitar tone is just amazing. Damned for All Time just absolutely crushes. I mean, the guitar tone just massacres. It's so good. The guitar tone on this album is immense, people. I mean, this is what, honestly, if Metallica were to follow up And Justice for All like immediately thereafter and not wait a couple of years to put out the Black Album, and they did like they just went right back into the studio and tried to recapture everything that they were doing on that album, that's this album right here. Although you can hear the bass on this, which is pretty cool. But yeah, if you love those big monstrous guitar tones of And Justice for All, and that's just kind of like that epic vibe that was going on there, that's this album pretty much. Just so good. Dance of the Dead is heavy as hell, but still catchy. And Carl, he's singing a little bit like Hetfield on this album. Buried, big grooves, but just crunchy as all hell. Break the Circle, just another nonstop riff fest, just really good. Painted Smiling Face, anthemic, very memorable. Minor the Eyes of God has got a lot of thrash elements. Pepper is singing on Vote with a Bullet, and he absolutely kills it. It's like I almost think that, like, obviously Carl didn't quite work out here with this band, but Pepper did all that little bit of singing on this album, and they're probably like, you know what, maybe this is the guy. Maybe, our new guitar player, maybe he's the guy who should be singing for this band, because he kills it on Vote with a Bullet. So good. And just a great song. White Noise, totally mashes. And it's got like this Pantera style feel to it. This kind of Pantera's groovy thrash type of thing, just big riffs, big production, just love it. Honestly, this album is a total killer. It just reminds me of late 80s Metallica, similar era or early 90s Pantera with maybe a touch of Danzig thrown in. Never-ending riffs, the production slays. This is the underrated album in the catalog for sure. Just so good. If you haven't gone back that far with them, I totally urge you to check that out. So, of course, by process of elimination, my number one is going to be Deliverance from 1994, their fourth album. I mean, this is the album that really got me hooked onto this band, because I remember, like, when this album came out, I didn't listen to Blind. I really didn't get turned onto that all that much. And my memories of Corrosion were those first two albums, and thinking, that, maybe not a band that's really for me. And then I heard Albatross on the radio, or I saw it on MTV or something like that, whatever. And I was like, oh, I like this. What is this? Like Corrosion of Conformity. It's like the Corrosion of Conformity. I hadn't heard them in ages. And it's like, that sounds like a different band. Kind of, right? But yeah, this is good stuff. Again, John Custer, once again, working, I think he worked on most of these albums. And here they're signed to Columbia Records. Pepper now, of course, taking over all the lead vocals on the album, as well as playing second guitar. Music on here is more of a southern tinge stoner metal style, but it's still like really heavy and beefy and with some doom edge at times. Heaven's Not Overflowing totally rules. What a great opener. Just so good. I mean, the nasty guitar tones are just absolutely awesome. And I think Pepper's kind of like southern rock drawl really fits the music well. It's like they came up with something completely new here, and I think it really works. Albatross, like I mentioned, that was a minor hit. Great anthem. Killer riffs. So catchy. Love it. To me, the first like three songs are just amazing. Clean My Wounds. Dun, 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 dun. I mean, these guys are just like delivering riffs every which way you look. It's just crazy. And that Clean My Wounds might be my favorite song on the album. It's just absolutely amazing. The riff is just so awesome. It's groovy. It's a great headbanger. Love it. Shake Like You. Great stuff. Just stoner metal, slow, good. Broken Man, again, that whole kind of doom-laden, dirgy type stuff, but it's got groove. Senior Olympio, again, I love the groove on this album because as heavy as some of the songs are, there's groove everywhere you turn. So good. 7 Days, moody, but still melodic and catchy. Migraine is faster. You got the title track is great. You got these killer wah-wah riffs on the title track. Awesome stuff. Shake Like You, again, the massive riffs and just the catchy harmonies and the choruses are so memorable. Pearls Before Swine is the closer. It's kind of gloomy and doomy, but still really good. And you throw in a couple little instrumentals here, which are pretty well done. And I think you have like a near perfect album here. You know, it's really good. And the album goes gold here in the States. The only time in their career which they would have a like a certified album like that. So yeah, that's my number one, The Great Deliverance. I think, you know, if you're new to this band and you just want to kind of check out you know, a couple albums right off the bat, I would say definitely go for these three right away. If you like kind of like doomy stuff and stoner stuff and just good like kind of southerny heavy stuff, I think you could do very well for yourselves to check out those. And then, you know, you got a whole bunch more to check out after that, you know, and I would say you should probably squeeze this in there as well. So, but yeah, a whole bunch of really good albums, a really great band that hopefully we see something new from in the not too distant future, because it's been a while. It's now been 6 years. So COC folks, hopefully you got something for us, and you know, we'll see. So anyway, rank them as you like them down in the comments below. And like I said, if you've never investigated Corrosion of Conformity, go out, listen to a couple albums, and then come back and in the comments, let us know what you thought of them. Because I think a lot of this stuff it's like, yeah, it's pretty heavy, but a lot of these albums are just very memorable, very catchy, and you know, just easy listening stuff, as heavy as it all is. But if you love big riffs, if you love big, heavy, crushing riffs, you're a guitar nut, this is the band for you. So go check them out. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as it posts. And please hit the like button before you leave. Also down below, we got the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, our merch page, and our Cameo page. Thank you in advance for all your support there. And we'll see you soon here with more stuff. I'm not quite sure 100% what's coming next week. It might be Rich Catino and I doing Gamma Ray. That might be coming up. Just so you know, some other ones that are in the works. Rich and I are going to do the great German power metal band Gamma Ray. I'm also going to be doing at some point in the not too distant future, John Gaffney and I, Mr. Lair the Alchemist, we're going to rank the catalog of Warlord, great U.S. kind of classic metal band, Warlord, featuring Mark Zonder from Fate's Warning on drums. That's not a big catalog. That's probably coming up in the not too distant future. I'm also going to be ranking the albums of Enforcer and Striker and Haunt, and you know, all these kind of traditional American bands. Those are all coming, as well as all sorts of other stuff. I know Grant Arthur and I are also working on a Poco ranking, and then down the road too, Black Oak, Arkansas. So there's like lots of things that are in the works over the next couple of months, and additional stuff I haven't even mentioned. I've got other stuff that I'll be doing solo as well. So lots to do on ranking the albums. For those of you who occasionally throw in a little comment saying, oh, Pete must be running out of ideas for bands for ranking the albums because we're getting all these obscure stuff. Well, Corrosion is not obscure. I did Anthrax last week. That's not obscure. So some of them aren't obscure at all, but you gotta, I mean, I've done hundreds of these over the years, right? We've done over 500 ranking the album shows. So that's 500 bands. So, you know, it's like now all the big bands have already been covered. So we're going to grab these nuggets of these other really good bands that have decent catalogs that either I'm new to, or I'm filling out the catalogs, or I'm revisiting and all that sort of thing. So yeah, there'll never be a shortage of these episodes for ranking the albums. So that's a good thing. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Also down below, we got the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, our merch page, and our Cameo page. Thank you in advance for all your support there, as always, and we'll see you tomorrow for the Hudson Valley Squares on Labor Day here in the States. I hope everybody enjoys their day off. And just remember everything that is so great about Labor Day. And but we'll see you tomorrow night if you're free with the Hudson Valley Squares. We're going to be talking about some underrated hard rock and metal bands. And till then, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching. See you next week here on Ranking the Albums. Take care. Bye-bye.